Hey guys, Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist in what they call the Beverly Hills of Bali, Nusa Dua, where all the diplomats hang out. Very fancy stuff. But wanted to do a video based on some requests that we've gotten as of late. And those requests are for a video on where do I pay tax as a freelancer? Interesting question. There are a number of factors, and in this video I'm going to be talking about some concepts that we can't go into depth in one video or else it would take an hour and a half. But you can look up a lot of these concepts in our other videos and on nomadcapitalist.com to get a bigger idea. Questions like this are why we do plans, why we work with folks one-on-one to develop a plan at Nomad Capitalist, because there are so many different variables, and what works for this guy over here on that form may not work for this guy over here on a different internet site thing. So I'll go through some of the basics with you and you can take it from there. One thing before you really go through the factors are asking yourself, am I a freelancer? There are folks who run what they would call a business, what I might call a business, what you might call a business, that the tax office says, no, that's just you being self-employed. This is a common issue for small and kind of home office businesses. A lot of people who are traveling around the world and doing a business are doing most, if not all, of the work themselves. And while they may say, hey, I'm building my business, the tax office might say you're self-employed. So figuring out, are you a freelancer, are you self-employed, or are you really an employee of a working, growing business? It's an important question. Now to the factors. Three main factors for figuring out how you pay tax as a freelancer: your citizenship, your residence, and again, the type of business and the structure of the business that you're operating. Citizenship is pretty easy. If you're a U.S. citizen, you pay tax on your worldwide income. There is what's called a foreign earned income exclusion. We have a video on that. You can exempt the first 102 grand in income in a calendar year, whether that income is freelance income, income from a foreign business that you run, or whatever. For freelancers who, in the eyes of the IRS, aren't running a real business, you may have to pay Social Security Medicare tax. That's one of the things that people have come to me, and we've actually helped them save that Social Security Medicare tax, but not everyone can actually save that. So if you're a U.S. citizen, you got to pay tax. The first $100 and change $1,000 every year is free, but there are exclusions, and in some cases you'd have to pay Medicare and Social Security even if you don't pay income tax on the state or federal or city level. Every other citizenship you're fine, and that's where we get to where do you live. So I did a video called The Nomad Tax Trap, where I talked about how people from countries like Canada, parts of Europe, Australia, are having a hard time, or harder time than before, getting out of their home country for tax purposes. So what it used to be is you just live in Australia fewer than 183 days a year, and hey, I don't live here. They're getting smarter about it, and they're putting in place more and more rules, and they have more and more court rulings that say who actually lives there and who doesn't. Becoming tax non-resident in your country, again, that's one of those topics where there's so many countries that we could cover that we could do a video all day on that. But the first step is become tax resident in non-resident in your country, wherever you're at. Again, if you're in the U.S., you can't go through that process. You're always going to pay. Everyone else, figure out how to become tax non-resident in your country by, the first step is living outside of your country and then meeting whatever other criteria that country has. The other step is don't go and become tax resident somewhere else. Generally speaking, 183 days a year makes you tax resident. There are countries that practice what is called territorial taxation, where they exempt foreign source income. However, even that can be a little bit dicey, because if you're working there, they can make the argument it's not really foreign source income. You're doing all of the work in their country. It's the fact that you merely get paid in a different bank account doesn't always work. So, you know, you can live in Thailand, you can live in Malaysia, Panama, Costa Rica. These are frequent examples of territorial taxation. They pretty much leave you alone. It's a bit nebulous whether you should pay or not. Other countries that claim to have territorial taxation, it's a bit less nebulous. If you're working in there, you should pay. But the bottom line is, if you want to be totally clear that you're not establishing tax residence anywhere else, keep it under 183 days. And as I always tell people, treat that 183 days like the North Korean border. Don't get too close. Don't walk right up 5 inches away to where maybe you sneeze and fall over. Keep it less than 182. There are countries like the UK and Ireland where I believe it's a little bit different, more like 140 days a year. But the bottom line is, if you're constantly traveling, you should be able to establish tax residence somewhere, but make sure you don't do that. I see people who are going and living in Spain full time and then being surprised when they get a tax bill, or when they're asked, where's your tax return? You can't live in Spain full-time and not pay tax there. I mean, you can maybe get away with it, like you could anywhere else, but if they find you, they're going to say you have to pay, and the rates are high. So don't go and get resident somewhere else. If you want to visit Spain as a tourist, go right ahead, but don't just move in full-time and expect to not pay tax. You have to be living different places, and increasingly, as I talk about in the video, The Nomad Tax Trap, you want to have a place that actually you call home. Find a tax haven or a territorial tax country, get a lease there, perhaps get a residence permit there, spend a little time there, and then travel from there. The last step is, what's your structure? Are you a corporation or are you a sole proprietor? Sole proprietors are going to pay tax, if they do fall into a tax net somewhere, on their worldwide income. So let's say you're the guy who is from Germany and you moved down to Spain and just say, hey, I'm an EU citizen, I'll live in Spain, and they find out you're living there full time and want you to pay. If you're a sole trader, your entire income, your entire net income is taxable there. If you have a company, then you can pay yourself a salary from that company, and then you can potentially limit how much money you as a person get and keep the rest of the money in the company. The challenge there with setting up a company comes in where if you're the only one doing the work, again, it's not really a company. It's not really a business. It's you owning your job. You doing 100% of the work is not really a business or a company in the eyes of the tax authorities. And so people, in many cases, who do all the work in their company and then set up a corporation thinking that's going to be the trick to reduce their taxes, sometimes, and again, it's a question based on, what's your particular situation, but sometimes find that basically the tax authority where they're living will just totally invalidate that company for tax purposes and say, yeah, you still got to pay. You're doing all the work. You can't use a company to shelter money that you would have made if you're doing all the work. So what's the structure? What's your citizenship? What's your resident status? What's the structure of the company? 3 important factors for what makes you qualify to pay tax as a freelancer, as someone who's nomadic. It's possible that you can pay nowhere. It's possible to pay 0. But I won't say it's hard. You need to know what you're doing. And the idea of, I'm just not going to live anywhere, no one can find me, is increasingly becoming something that's being challenged. You'll want to do it the right way and the smart way from the beginning. Keep those 3 factors in mind. Consider how the tax authority, where you're a citizen, where you live, where your company is, how they view you, if it's as an employee or as someone who merely owns their job, and you'll have some idea of where you should be paying tax, if anywhere.